I'm sitting here with Greg Dean. He is the Director of Industry Relations with the South Dakota Telecommunications Association. Greg Dean, thanks for joining me on Peer-to-Peer.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here. Looking forward to having the discussion.
Great. Could you tell me a little bit about what the Telecommunications Association does real quick?
Yeah, our organization provides government relations and regulatory advocacy for 18 member companies in South Dakota. And the way I describe these companies is they all have long and rich histories in South Dakota, some dating back as far as 100 years. And they all, the way I describe it is, grew up as telephone companies, hardline telephone companies. But as technology has changed, they have morphed and evolved, and I think every one of them would tell you today that they are broadband providers first and foremost, probably video providers second, and hardline telephone companies third.
So the governor's proposed a $100 million broadband expansion program for the state, and she mentioned that proposal again during her State of the State address earlier this year. I'd like to play a clip from that before we start our discussion.
I believe that we can create an environment where families are not forced to choose between the modern economy on the one hand and then life in their hometown on the other. And that's why I'm proposing that we invest in connecting this state with broadband. Even the most remote communities across our state should be provided the tools that they need to be connected. Thriving communities from border to border will yield much better results for our state and our families, rather than concentrated growth in just two big cities.
I was wondering if you could tell me how many South Dakotans would be affected by this proposal?
Well, the best information that's been put together is that it likely impacts over 135,000 South Dakotans that today don't have quality broadband service. It comprises about 27,000 households spread over more than 10,000 square miles.
And so what role would the Telecommunications Association play in that rollout?
Yeah, and our member companies would be the ones that would actually be doing the work. They would be the ones that would build the infrastructure, that would provide the service and operate the network. And the way I describe a broadband network to people is think about it in terms of either a water system or a highway system. And a water system is maybe the best analogy because once you build the infrastructure, once you put the pipe in the ground, and in this case, think about fiber optic as being a water pipe. Once you put that pipe in the ground, really all you're limited by is the size of the pumps that you put on that pipe to drive that water through the system. And it's a lot of the same way with broadband. Once you put that fiber in the ground, the electronics that you put on that fiber optic system, on that network, really are what amplify that signal so that it not only can push more data through the system, but it also can push it at higher speeds.
So you're talking about this definitely in terms of like sounding like a public works project. What entails getting this broadband, fiber optic cable in the ground? And what various challenges, I guess, sort of exist across the state?
Well, and a lot of what drives broadband projects is, and it's probably best put by one of our company general managers, because he talks about one of the first things they look at is population density and distance. Because in order for a project to be viable, you have to be able to serve a number of households and businesses to derive that economic return. And so it has to be a project that's got to be economically feasible, and that's where a lot of the public programs, whether it be Connect South Dakota, like the governor has proposed, or other federal projects, come into play in terms of serving remote areas of rural America, and that's really kind of where we're looking at in a lot of cases in South Dakota, is that population density, and then the amount of infrastructure that really has to be built to reach those various homes and businesses.
Could you talk a little bit about the difference in putting fiber optic cable in, more rural areas and farm ground and ranch country, as opposed to putting fiber optic in the Black Hills?
There's a distinct difference, because once you made the decision to do that project, putting fiber in the prairie or across the plains is just a totally different situation than building into the Black Hills, just because of the geology. Plowing fiber into a pasture land or farm ground. Our estimates have always been that it really costs about $15,000 per mile of line laid, roughly, depending upon a variety of factors, but about $15,000 a mile to put a mile of fiber into rural South Dakota. If you look at the Black Hills and you think about the challenges with not only the geology and the geography, but trying to carve through the granite that permeates the Black Hills, you take that $15,000 figure and really multiply it by a multiple of at least 4. And so it becomes much more expensive to provide service with that kind of infrastructure in the Black Hills.
Given the amount of effort that it takes to, put in broadband, I guess why is this, the right solution for South Dakota?
Well, our companies just about default to using fiber optics because it's the most proven solution. It's the most and best long-term solution for the customer, whether it be that in a residential setting or a business setting. From our standpoint, we see the value of connecting people with fiber optics because the upper ends of those speeds and capacities really, they continue to push them out even higher and higher all the time out of the labs. I mean, that's why if you're looking for any kind of a high-speed connection, whether it be 500 meg, a gigabit, or higher, you really need a piece of fiber to make that connection viable. It's the best long-term solution. The life expectancy of fiber optics is roughly 30 years, and so it provides the best long-term amortization for South Dakota over the next several decades.
There's been technology kind of like high-altitude balloons that have been announced to send out internet signal, or maybe the use of cell phones or something like that. Why not those technologies?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. Whether you talk about the balloons that I think Google is testing, or low Earth satellites, those are still unproven technologies. They're still for the most part, in the beta testing phase. They're still trying to figure out if they can actually deliver in real world settings what they think they can do in a laboratory setting. So to really kind of place a bet with public monies today, I think is probably not the best use of public monies in terms of developing public-private partnerships. Just the demand for data services is growing exponentially year by year. Right now, the current definition of broadband as set by the Federal Communications Commission is 25 megabits down and 3 megabits up. And that's a 6-year-old definition. And we all know how much technology has changed and how much consumer demand has changed in the last 6 years. And so it's likely that the FCC will drive that definition of broadband upward in the not too distant future. And that's going to be a fluid definition over time. In fact, I've seen some things that indicate that within the next 5 to 6 years, most consumers, in order to garner the real benefits out of the applications they will use on a daily basis, will probably need anywhere from 400 to 500 megabits, maybe even as high as a gigabit speed, just in a consumer setting. And so those are the kinds of capacities and speeds that a proven technology like fiber optics can really deliver for South Dakota businesses and consumers.
Could you talk real quick about how the demand for broadband has changed within the last year?
Yeah, and I think we all can think back to where we were a year ago at this time, and just how life has changed in the last 10 to 12 months. We have certainly changed in terms of of doing a lot of things from home that we never would have thought about doing prior, whether it's remote learning, whether it's work from home, whether it's telemedicine. There are all kinds of things that are really driven by the ability of people to access a broadband connection at their homes. We utilize, I think a year ago at this time, if you asked people in this building if they'd ever heard of a Zoom call, 99% of the people would say no. Well, now whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any other kind of two-way video application that's been used for remote learning, whether it's been used for work from home, those are just the norm. Those are just the standard that we utilize. And even though we're moving back into a kind of normal environment, I utilize Zoom and Microsoft Teams regularly, even though I've gone back into the office a couple of months ago on a regular basis. And so I think we've evolved very quickly, and the need for two-way video, that stable and vital upload speeds, those capacities that make the ability to hold remote meetings and remote learning, those are vitally important in today's world.
Yeah, it's amazing how Zoom has become, like Zoom call has become part of the lexicon, like Kleenexes, and I'm going to Google something,
Exactly.
What kind of, if the legislature were to approve this $100 million expenditure, what kind of time frame are we looking at here to, reach every corner of the state?
Well, I think the realities are that it's going to take several years, and I hate to sit here today and promise you that it's going to be done in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, because I think it's going to take a lot of different public and private investment to bring broadband to all corners of South Dakota. And again, I'll go back to and equate it to the way that electrical service came to rural America. It came over a period of time, over a period of years, and it took a very strong commitment from the public sector to make sure that every home and farm and business had electrical service. And we're very much in a parallel situation with that with broadband service today.
Well, that did it for all my questions. Was there anything you wanted to add that I didn't ask about?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time.